Welcome to Engineering Influence podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies. And today, very excited to be looking at something that we really haven't done a lot of in the past shows that we've had. We've talked a lot about engineering, we've talked a lot about techniques, but we haven't talked about materials. And something, of course, critically important is really the bedrock of our surface infrastructure system, which is concrete and the paving materials that we put on the roadways, and the increasing push internationally and, of course, domestically for low carbon or reduced carbon concrete. And we're looking at this and especially in light of a webinar we're going to be holding on this subject in the near future, and want to give you a preview of what we're going to be talking about. And we are joined by a number of experts in this field. I'm very pleased to be joined by Thomas Van Dam. He's the principal at Janney Elstner Associates out of Northbrook, Illinois. We have also Eric Ferrebee. He is Senior Director of Technical Services with the American Concrete Pavement Association, and Peter Taylor at the National Concrete Pavement Technology Center. Really pleased to be joined by all three of you. Thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Yeah.
So let's first, Tom. WJE is a global firm employing architects, engineers, material scientists, really tackling a lot of these issues that go into designing the future of American infrastructure and infrastructure around the world. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your firm and your background in this area.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a principal at Janney Elstner. We are an international firm, but really firmly rooted in the United States. About 750 employees, and we pride ourselves on being problem solvers. And so, as a firm, I'm a fairly recent hire, actually here within the last year, but really brought on board to take on this topic. The firm recognizes in dealing with our clients the importance of carbon reduction in the infrastructure that our clients are building, and in particular within concrete, which we'll probably get to, but is, as a material, because we use so much of it, has a fairly large carbon footprint, responsible about 1% of the greenhouse gas emissions reported annually in the United States. So, our firm is very committed to taking on this issue. And I'm very happy to be working there and with others to address it.
That's great. And Eric, I want to go to you. I mean, with ACPA, tell our audience who might not be familiar with ACPA, really its core focus and what you do there and a little bit about how you come into the conversation.
Absolutely. So the American Concrete Pavement Association is the national trade association that represents the concrete pavers, as well as the material suppliers and equipment manufacturers involved in concrete pavements. And so that's kind of what we represent, and we've been heavily involved in sustainability efforts related to concrete pavements for over a decade now, really trying to look at the strategies we can use to kind of improve concrete pavements, both in terms of longevity and durability, but also looking at how we can reduce the environmental footprint, like Tom said. So lots of different strategies are out there, and it's really about looking at trying to pull all the different levers that we can to improve concrete pavements.
And Peter, let's round it out with you with the Concrete Pavement Technology Center. Tell us about the Technology Center and your role there and kind of what your thoughts are.
Sure. The CP Tech Center is a research center within Iowa State University. We're a fairly small group. We are 4 engineers and some assistant staff. Our role nationally is to assist with implementing innovative technology into practice. So we like to think of ourselves as being at the nexus between industry, academia, and material suppliers and agencies, so that we provide that connection, helping practitioners write good specifications, make good pavements, and deliver it all. So we work closely with ACPA, with professors, and with FHWA, and the DOTs around the country. Our involvement with sustainability has been long running. I think our first publication on it was co-authored by myself and Tom back in 2008. So this isn't a new topic for us. And again, our role is getting information in the hands of everyday people.
Yeah. Fantastic. This is the kind of trifecta.
Right.
We have the engineering firms, we've got the trade association, and we have the people who are doing the research on specifications and application. So couldn't imagine a better group to talk about this. I want to start off with Tom and Eric actually on this, because I want to go first with the whole idea of what is meant by low carbon or reduced carbon concrete. How is that measured, and how is the process changing with the development of those materials?
You want to go first, Eric, or do you want me to?
Go ahead, Tom.
The idea of low carbon, I guess when you start with that, it makes you think, well, what is high carbon, or what is the benchmark? And so, the good news in this is that within the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a real push to actually use a process developed by ISO and widely accepted throughout the world, in which a product category rule has been written for concrete. This rule allows a practitioner of the art of life cycle assessment to then look at a product such as the concrete and assess its the embodied carbon within that material. And it's measured always in kilograms of CO2 equivalent. And in the case of concrete, it's per cubic yard. So we do have a mixing of units there, but that is the way it is done in the United States under our product category rule. And then from that, they come up with what's called an environmental product declaration. So that environmental product declaration for a given concrete will tell you basically that concrete truck at the gate has this much embodied carbon per cubic yard of the concrete that it's carrying. And then from that, there are benchmarks that have been established by collecting data from over 70,000 EPDs around the country. And now we know what the average is, and we have some idea of what the distribution is. And then from there, you can define low. And I'll leave it at that if Eric wants to try to pick it up there after I probably made a mess of that definition.
That's a great start. Most of the focus that we're talking about right now is looking at those EPDs, environmental product declarations. What are the strategies we can do now that we have a benchmark to further reduce our carbon footprint with those upfront EPDs? And so that's a big portion of what we're focused on. We're also focused on what happens later on in pavement's life. So not just the upfront embodied impacts, but also later on impacts. Really, it's kind of getting to that full life cycle impacts. That's the ultimate goal down the road. And that gets to be a little bit more challenging, right? We know when we have a mixture of concrete, it's very easy to define what materials we're using, where we're getting them from, and it's a lot easier to define that environmental product declaration. Once we start talking about life cycle impacts later on in the pavement's life, it's still something that we can do, but it gets a little more complicated and a little harder to regulate. So it's not quite as standardized or as easy to do as an environmental product declaration, which is becoming kind of the metric for us to calculate our upfront impacts of creating concrete. So that's kind of where we're focused right now, and got also that long-term view of trying to look at the life cycle impacts as well.
So Peter, I want to talk about kind of material specifications. You do a lot of work, bridging the gap between the producers of materials, the DOTs and the agencies that are looking to use this, and the push by public sector clients to really reduce their carbon imprint, and cities and municipalities that are trying to go as clean and green as possible. How are the material specifications changing to take advantage of low carbon or reduced carbon concrete?
That's a very big question. The best cement specification to help us get towards low carbon cement materials is ASTM-C 1157, or just above that is the ASTM-C 595. Now, 1157 is a specification that has no chemical or raw ingredient requirements within it. You can make your cement out of anything you like as long as it performs okay, it's acceptable. Now, 595 is slightly more prescriptive in that it does put limits on how much clinker, how much limestone, how much other products you can throw in there. So they're slightly different materials, specifications. But both of these documents allow us to be able to specify and use cements with a reduced carbon footprint. Now, when it comes to the concrete, there is nothing on how to make a low carbon mixture. However, the work that we've been doing has been providing tools of guidance on how to set about preparing a mixture that is going to be with a lower cement content, or at least a lower clinker content. And so, an example is some work we did at Minnesota last year, where by carefully juggling the aggregate proportions, we were able to reduce the cement content by about 15%. The performance of the mixture is just the same. And so, yeah, there aren't any specs in that field yet. And I sometimes wonder if there will be, other than if the agency comes along, and this is what is likely to happen. Federal government or the agency is likely to come along and say, take your best EPD, cut it by 20%, go. So then they can turn to the tools that we have to be able to say, well, here's how you can go about getting there.
Yeah.
The important part is that we do not want to compromise engineering performance. So those are paramount, and then the carbon requirement is on top of it. That doesn't replace it.
You see the push mainly, and this is open to everyone. I mean, is it mainly in paving, or is it also in construction? So you see more attention being paid to the materials being put into, the surface construction, or is it equal in vertical construction or what have you?
I would say that the pressure is the same across all of the concrete the concrete industry, mainly again because the bulk of the carbon footprint is in the cement, and the cement doesn't really care where it's going, whether it's vertical or horizontal.
I would like to, add with the specifications, the critical thing for the industry, especially the consulting industry, is when you look at your spec to make sure you have not created barriers intentionally or unintentionally within that specification. And so, for example, Peter is talking about a great strategy to reduce the carbon footprint of concrete is to use less binder, so less cementitious material. If you have a given spec that says minimum 6 sack mixture or minimum 611 pounds per cubic yard mixture, right there you've created a barrier by which one of the biggest strategies to reduce your carbon footprint has now been taken away from you. Right, so you can't get there. The other one, as Peter has alluded to, is if you do not allow the use of the ASTM-C 595 cements or even the ASTM-C 1157, you're now forcing the supplier providing you with a material. You're taking away their ability to lower that carbon footprint. So that's a really important element of the specs, is to make sure that that we have not created barriers within the specifications to allow the innovation to happen that's required. And I would add, one advantage I think that I might have working as a consultant now is I'm equally working with like the federal government and state DOTs on carbon reduction, but also with our partners in the private sector. And so even last week we did a tilt. It was 2 weeks ago. No, 1 week ago. Time flies when you're having fun. A tilt up demonstration for Amazon, actually. So it was in partnership with Amazon and a supplier and a contractor to actually go out and build 3 different tilt-up panels experimentally, business as usual case, one with a slight to moderate carbon reduction, and a third one with no clinker or very little clinker in the cement at all. So a very, very low carbon material. And this work was fabricate these in very harsh conditions and then tilt them up. And we have collected a tremendous amount of data, and we'll be publishing that soon. And that was actually funded by Breakthrough Energy Foundation, our work. So there's a lot of interesting work going on right now, pushing the envelope to demonstrate the viability of these materials.
Because when you look at a potential client like Amazon and the amount of work that they're doing, of course, Microsoft, for example, also on data centers and building these large structures that have to go up pretty quickly. And, it's kind of a one design. You don't have to redesign it each time. I mean, you can see these large institutional private sector clients looking for ways to improve their building, but also be able to report back that they're lowering their overall carbon footprint in what they own. I mean, Eric and Tom, I mean, what are you seeing? I mean, Amazon, I can imagine absolutely they'd be all for it. How much pressure or how much interest from your other private sector entities are you seeing for reduced carbon concrete? Your other developers or for commercial real estate or what have you. Are there any sectors that are pushing more than others, or is it pretty much constant across the board?
You want to go for that one, Eric?
I'll start. I'll let you finish. So we're seeing a lot of interest in this and a lot of push for this, especially on the industrial side, on the commercial side, with these private developers that are making it a priority and basically having and just driving forward as fast as they can, which is great. And it's great to see them kind of adopting this and making sustainability a big priority right off the bat. On the public side, it is a little bit slower, but it's kind of just a giant ship that's trying to turn and get moving in that direction. It seems like there's not quite as much freedom to be able to immediately implement different things and say that sustainability is going to be one of the ways that we're going to measure and make decisions on. But that is something that we're seeing more on the, like I said, on the industrial and the private sector side. But it does seem like it's starting to become a bigger priority with the public side as well.
Yeah, and again, to follow up, I mean, I mentioned Amazon, but you're right. There's also Google, there's Meta, there's Microsoft. All of them are actually in partnership right now through a group called the Hyperscalers for their data centers. And they have actually put out a letter, and they are fully encouraging, more or less throwing the gauntlet down on carbon reduction in the construction of their data centers. So active engagement with these groups, from the perspective of ACEC membership, these innovators in their technologies are now innovators in pushing for low carbon construction materials. And I think it's going to push the entire industry in that direction.
In a way, I think it's not surprising that industry-based organizations are further ahead or pushing a little harder, because there's very little incentive for a public servant to take extra risk or try anything innovative if what they've done in the past has been successful. And that's only going to come to them through legislation.
Speaking of legislation, we have the Inflation Reduction Act in place, with, of course, tied in with the other larger IIJA, investment in infrastructure. But the Inflation Reduction Act specifically includes resources for reducing emissions and dealing with climate change. What is available in that bill that kind of fits in with the reduced carbon area and can firms take advantage of that, or are you seeing firms take advantage of that?
I'll lead on this one if I could, because I'm up to my armpits in it these days. The Inflation Reduction Act element, there's a number of elements that are directly supporting a movement towards low carbon materials. And, I'm not intimately familiar with all of them. I know that right now there's some that are being run through EPA. There's also the GSA, right, benchmarks that are out there that, again, consultants are confronted with when building a GSA building. The one that all three of us are tracking very closely is the Inflation Reduction Act low carbon transportation material grant that's coming out through federal highways. And that grant is not yet out. If you go to their website and look it up, you'll see that it's going to come out the winter of 2023. So I guess we're just almost getting into winter, right? but we're running out of 2023. So we expect to see an announcement on this sometime here within the next month. And it's going to provide, it's a $2 billion program to help transportation agencies of all kinds really adopt low carbon transportation material policies, procedures, and ultimately to build with these materials. So all of us are very, very excited by this prospect. We're waiting to see what it looks like, but I do think there's going to be a massive role for consultants in this to help the DOTs take this across the finish line, to go from concept to plan sets to specifications to construction. So as a consultant, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what that's going to look like.
Peter, what's your view from the Technology Center?
Like Tom, sort of watching and waiting for the FHWA to put out the details of their program, and then planning to work with both ACPA and Tom and some of his colleagues on helping agencies apply for some of this funding, and indeed helping them to do the work that they have promised to do through the funding. So yeah, I think, as Tom says, this is going to be exciting times for us.
And Eric, of course, ACPA for your own advocacy efforts and working with the IIJ and IRA and getting all that passed. I remember dealing with that during COVID with Congress and seeing what was going to come out. What's ACPA's take on the IRA and what's contained within it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as Tom mentioned, there's a lot of money in here devoted towards sustainable materials, and we're excited about that. Like I said earlier, sustainability has been something that we've been focused on for over 10 years, but it's really hard to, get a bunch of contractors ready to go and doing all of these things to be more sustainable when there isn't a whole lot of incentive or focus or demand on it. And so by putting some money behind this, it's really exciting to see kind of the transformation of how this can develop, and we can start to not only be building sustainable pavements and concrete structures, but also start quantifying it a bit more than has been done in the past. And that's what some of the money that's already coming out from the EPA is kind of focused on. And that's what also that FHWA program is going to be focused on as well. So there's a lot of focus, or there's a lot of emphasis on this, and now there's some money coming behind it, which is really exciting for the contractors, as well as the consultants, as well as academia, as well as agencies. I know there's there are many that are excited about this as well, and it's just a matter of what's it all going to look like, and how are we going to achieve those sustainability goals that we're trying to set out.
It's a smart plan to be going through this process adopted by the FHWA or by the federal government, in that traditionally it's extraordinarily difficult to get new technology in practice because of the conservative nature of our business. And the best way to do it is build one and see how it goes. And so here, where there's money available for someone to get paid to take on that risk, is great, because a couple of years from now we'll be able to look back and say, yep, we cut the cement content and no one died, we're all good.
Yeah, I do think it's really important, to circle back on both of those points. The one that Eric made with the use of EPDs and making them now become more common. In time, and that time is going to be, I think, only a couple of years. They're going to be very common, right? So we're going to be able to have a very good idea of what the embodied carbon will be of a concrete mix, for example. Once we know that information, once we benchmark it, then we can apply these strategies that have been discussed to reduce and to get to that low carbon targets that are in something like the IRA. And then, the follow up is Peter says this gives us then the opportunity to go out and actually build things that both from a DOT perspective and even privately, and then demonstrate the savings that have occurred and the benefit. And by monitoring performance, I have seen in the last 2 to 3 years, the change in this industry has been remarkable. I've been doing this now 39 years. I added it up the other day. It kind of frightened me a little bit. More has changed in the last 2 years than the entire, preceding 37 years of my career. And I think a lot of consultants are not quite there yet, but they're going to be there very shortly. And so it's a very, very exciting time. Some would say a little scary, but also filled with opportunity and innovation.
No, absolutely. I think that's very well put. I think we are entering a time now where we have, for the first time in a long time, a couple of pieces of very large legislation that have been made into law that enable a lot of innovation to kind of be that's been in development for a while to be implemented. And it's a little bit of a scary time, but I think there's a great set of opportunities out there for everyone in the industry, the built environment, the engineers, the builders, the what have you, to really take advantage of this. I don't want to go too much into the detail outside of this because I still want people to register for the webinar that's happening next month. So, kind of the elevator pitch on the webinar here. Why should firms register? What are they probably going to come out of the webinar learning more about, and what kind of resources do you want to hope people kind of step away from after the webinar is done? Thomas, then we'll go to Peter, and then Eric.
Yeah, I think that the pitch here as a consultant is, our job as a consultant is to meet our clients' needs, right? And this is something that our clients are asking for. And even those clients that traditionally we wouldn't think will be asking for it, I can assure you they will be. This is not going away. And so, from our perspective as the ones who will be providing this service to our clients, it's really important for ACEC members to become very well educated on this topic. And so, I hope what we can be able to convey in the webinar is why this is important to them, why this is going to change the way you do business. With respect to concrete, that there's a lot of opportunity here. We have a lot of levers to pull to do a lot better. And then, and finally, in the end, how we can actually assess the difference we're making and get better and better. So I'm pretty optimistic and pretty excited. And I think from the consulting perspective, they really have the most to advantage or the most to gain here by becoming well-versed in this topic.
From a consultant's point of view, and I have been one, I did the opposite. Tom went from academia to consulting, and I went from consulting to academia. One of the challenges is going to be that our materials are changing. Some of the performance things that we have got used to over the last 40 years that I've been practicing may not be valid anymore. And so, there is a challenge to our designers and specifiers that copying and pasting language and using the same old spreadsheet may not be right. And there is going to be a challenge. We have to do some more thinking. We're going to have to do some more learning. And so, they need to be aware that change is coming. It's not necessarily bad, but it's necessary.
I mean, they've hit on most of the good points here, but the one thing that I would leave it with is that, concrete has a lot of great qualities. And when we're talking and focusing about sustainability and some of the strategies we're looking at here, we're really talking about shifting some of the engineering focus to making concrete better. And there are ways that we can do that, both that are both beneficial on the economic side, but as well as the sustainability side, focused on the environmental impacts. And that's really what we're trying to kind of shift the focus, that there are opportunities here that we should be taking advantage of, and that aren't super scary. There are things that we can easily implement to start off with, and as we go along, once we try to get further and further down the road to extremely low carbon emissions with our materials, there are going to be things that need to be advances that need to happen, but they shouldn't deter us from going down this route of trying to improve our materials right now with the strategies that we have.
Perfect. Well, I do encourage everyone to go and register for the webinar, which is going to be taking place next month on the subject of reduced carbon concrete. Go up to acec.org for more information on that. We'll also put a link in the show notes. But for now, Thomas, Peter, and Eric, I really appreciate you coming on the show to give us a little bit of an intro on the issue itself and some detail about the use of reduced and low carbon paving materials. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
It's great being here.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Fantastic. And again, this has been Engineering Influence, a podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies, and we'll see you next time.